Hello, everybody, and welcome to the show. I am excited about today's show. So, listen, for anybody that isn't aware, well, I'm an old guy. I remember dinosaurs. I used to fight them. That's how I became a good fighter. Is I started fighting dinosaurs. Those raptors, they would come try and raid my nest, and that was just no good. So we'd fight them on a daily basis. Back then, I didn't have an axe. I had a club, and it was a no. Okay, I know, folks. I'm not even funny, but uh, there are some of us that do get tired on a day-to-day basis, and we are getting older, and there's a lot of fighting ahead of us, right? Despite the fact that we do have a Donald Trump presidency, we got all sorts of issues. We got schisms in MAHA. We got rhinos selling us down the river on a daily basis. There are problems everywhere. And so one of the things that we need is we need young people to step up. It's a crucial thing. And I can't tell you how important that is. And, because the schools have been totally ran by leftists and lunatics for such a long time, finding a young person that actually has the courage, the integrity, and the fortitude to speak out is a rare thing. Enter our friend Hannah Faulkner. Now, Hannah does a show on His Glory. We all love His Glory. I mean, Dave is one of my best. I just love those guys. I even like Chris. Don't tell him that, though. But wonderful people at His Glory. Some of the best people on the planet. And, they're just good. They're just good people. So you've got that. She's got a show over there. And Hannah is a wonderful young lady who is not afraid to speak out. She's not a brainwashed leftist lunatic who hasn't grown enough to figure out that she's being used. She's actually fighting and speaking out. So I'm super proud to talk to her and to kind of introduce her to y'all. We need this, folks. We need this badly. For old guys like me, we got to see some of this because that's the light at the end of the tunnel for all of us. So we're going to talk to Hannah. She's into all sorts of things. We'll get into that here in a minute. I also want to talk, listen, there's a new thing out there, saRNA. We're going to hit on some of that towards the end of the show. And I just did a white paper on it. And I'm just getting that out. We'll be publishing that publicly here. But just as a preview, I want you guys to know this. saRNA, based on the research, based on what we've done, it will be an STD. It will be an STD, and it'll probably be transmissible in other ways. Now, the MARNA is already kind of like that. But, when I say STD, let me explain what I mean. It will be a sexually transmissible thing, right? So if someone is vaccinated with saRNA, there is a legitimate potential for them to become contagious in the sense that if you were to have sex with them, something like that, you could potentially become infected. There's no informed consent. They're, of course, not going to tell you that. They're going to tell you that it can't happen. But there's a legitimate basis for concern, and we need to study that. There's also a legitimate basis for concern that it could transmit in other ways. And ultimately, we've got the Arctis saRNA that's being fast-tracked here in the United States. It needs to be studied. We need to study the shedding and the transmission stuff. We need to make sure that that's there because we can't have people being poisoned with this stuff without informed consent or some sort of consent. So we'll have that. I want to talk a little bit more. The internal battle between the means and TWC is continuing. So that's happening on the MAHA front. Trump is doing what Trump does, which is, making some good things happening all over the place. Just a lot to talk about today. So anyways, a big show. We're excited to talk about it. Excited to share this information with y'all. So make sure you stay tuned here. Before I get into any of that, let me ask y'all, please become a supporter. Give us $20 a month. Become a monthly supporter. $20 a month makes a huge difference for us. GiveSendGo.com/Renslaw. GiveSendGo.com/Renslaw. Please support us. Please donate. Please do whatever you can do there. Your $20 a month makes a huge difference to us. Give whatever you can give. If it's one time, if it's many times, if it's more, it's less, whatever. We're grateful for what you do. We got a lot to fight, and we do need your help. So please, anything you can do, we'll be grateful for. Also, make sure you go to TomRenz.com, www.tomrenz.com. And of course, you got our affiliates, Kirk Elliott Precious Metals. If you want a great crypto retirement plan, make sure you're checking Block Trust IRA. Sat Phone Store, wonderful people. But scroll down today, we've got a new affiliate up here. This is Earth Harmony. Now, Ed Group and Global Healing. And Ed has the best products on the market in my mind. Global Healing introduced me to these guys, and Global Healing sells Earth Harmony. So Earth Harmony, they have methylene blue, and their methylene blue is some of the best stuff out there. I want to urge you to check it out. If Ed and Earth Harmony recommend it, I can assure you it's a top quality product. And we use it ourselves in this house. So make sure you're checking it out. You get 10% off with code RENS10. So make sure you're using code RENS10. Get that 10% off. And, whatever you can do, just check these guys out. The methylene blue is huge. It's just top quality stuff. Their stuff's all wonderful. No chemicals, no fragrances, just top quality ingredients. So anyways, make sure you're checking those out. Make sure you're supporting those guys and supporting us by doing so. We love our sponsors. All right. Without further ado, let me introduce you to the one of the youngest, best warriors I know out there, Hannah Faulkner. How you doing, Hannah?
I am doing amazing. Thank you so much, Tom, for having me on the show today. Love the work you do. I know my grandfather is probably going to go back and watch this. He's been tuning into your work for the longest time. And I told him last week, I'm like, do you know who Tom Renz is? And he said, absolutely. I've been wanting you to have him on your show for a long time. I'm like, well, I'm going on his show next week. So thank you so much for having me on the show today. I appreciate it.
And your grandpa said hi, and I'd be happy to jump on your show anytime. We've got wonderful mutual friends. And of course, I saw you speak a few times at Reawaken. We both did that. And we've got a lot of mutual friends. So I'm glad to finally chat with you a little bit. Between His Glory and Reawaken and just all the different places, there's just a lot of spots where we cross paths. So I'm excited because you're 17 and you're not brainwashed. How does that happen?
Oh man, well, it's crazy world that we're living in. I am always blown away by the issues that we even have to debate about. Some of the most principled ideas that men can't become women, and you shouldn't be cutting off and chopping off kids' healthy breasts and genitals and castrating them with these chemicals like Lupron. But here we are, and like you said, we just got to keep fighting and keep standing. But I've been raised in a great family. Actually, in my book, Last Chance to Save Our Republic, I highlight in the last chapter the greatest issue facing America, which I say is the breakdown of the family unit between one man and one woman. The fastest way to enslave and entrap a nation is to break down the building block of that nation, and that's the family unit. And so I believe the feminist movement has been largely a huge component in the breakdown of the family, which we can get into later. But I come from a great family. My parents have been married for 21 years. They've raised us in a home where we talk about these issues. Since I could remember, we've always talked about what's happening in the news, what's happening in our culture. And I remember being around the age of 13, and I wanted to get involved in what I was seeing on Fox News and Newsmax, but I didn't know how to necessarily articulate the issues or how to get involved. But at the time, I was homeschooled, and I attended a homeschool tutorial. And I came to my homeschool tutorial one day, and I showed up, and a lady from Turning Point USA, which if your audience is familiar with Charlie Kirk, that's his powerful organization that really has helped a lot getting the youth to come out for President Trump and to come back to conservative values and principles. But I got involved with Turning Point USA when I was 13, and we had a few members, a few events here and there. But when I was 15 years old, August of 2022, my 7-year-old sister at the time was paralyzed in a freak swimming accident that paralyzed her from the chest down. And so because of her accident, we were placed in medical facilities, obviously for surgeries and the treatment that she needed. And this was the same time she was placed in these facilities was the exact same time that we started to see some legacy media outlets, but independent journalists like yourself really start to expose these medical industries for performing this mutilation on children. And so my family and I, as we were seeing these headlines and these independent journalists come out and expose these doctors for doing what they were doing, we were seeing it with our own eyes. In these facilities, we were seeing what they were doing. They had the rainbow flags everywhere in children's hospitals. I remember one specific time we walked into an appointment with a pediatrician, and this pediatrician comes in with a huge pronoun pin on her chest that says, "My pronouns are they, them." And so I thought to myself, I was 15 at that time, how can you claim to give medical advice to parents, but you don't even know something as simple as your biological sex? And so not only were these people pushing this rainbow sex cult, as I call it, onto the children, but they don't even accept reality. They don't even acknowledge the reality of that's right in front of them. Like the sky is blue and the grass is green. So I realized this was a problem. And I'm a Christian. I started praying. I'm like, God, what can I do about this? What can I do to bring some light to this issue? And so January of 2023, I hosted a Teens Against Gender Mutilation rally, the first Teens Against Gender Mutilation rally. We had 600 attendees, 200 protesters came out. Chloe Cole, who I'm sure you're familiar with. I'm sure you're familiar with Chloe Cole, right?
I know the name. I don't know if I met him, but I know the name. What state are you in, by the way?
I'm in Tennessee, the so-called conservative state of Tennessee. Yeah.
Okay, so you were fighting out down there. Yeah, I'll bet you did get some protesters because Tennessee's red and the people are red, but you got this fringe blue nutcase element down there that's kind of crazy. And man, they have a lot of pull in that state, considering how small it is.
Well, it's interesting. We actually, we're a red state, but many of these so-called conservative Republicans are just flat out communist Democrats. I mean, I show up to the school board meetings here pretty often. I'll go to speak, and there's this one. She sits in the middle. She's like the chairwoman of the school board, and she calls herself a Christian. She calls herself a conservative Republican. And every single time there is a book, and these are just maybe just a little bit explicit type of books. I mean, these are some of the most like having sexual relations with animals.
Yeah, we've seen those.
I mean, it's like that far. And every single time she supports the book, she votes the book in. And I came up to the school board meeting one day, and I spoke, and I said, it's concerning not only that you call yourself a conservative Republican and a Christian, but the numbness that is on your face as you vote to protect some of the most explicit material in the children's libraries at the elementary, middle, and high schools here in Rutherford County, Tennessee. It's disgusting. It's despicable. Her husband was the chair of the local GOP here. But anyways, I do not even call ourselves a conservative state anymore because we have too many rhino Republicans and those who call themselves Republicans, that I would even go as far as to say is that they're flat out communists.
Well, so, I mean, I guess the most important question I have is, what are your pronouns? No, I'm joking. I'm joking.
USA. My pronouns are USA. We should start there.
You have to forgive me. Like I said, I'm an old man and I'm a little jaded. And so I like to just joke around a bit, but so this is good. This is good. And you managed to figure out that, that you can't change reality just because you don't like it, which is a big deal. The way we describe transgenderism on this show is, I said, if you were to go to the doctor and have him sew a tail on your butt, and then go to this tattoo artist and have him tattoo scales all over you, and then you walked around and said, "Rawr, I'm a dinosaur," you still wouldn't be a dinosaur. You'd be an idiot with a tail on your butt. And that's kind of the transgender issue. At the end of the day, you can pretend to be whatever you want, but your pretending doesn't dictate my reality. And while I'm sorry that you have some sort of a mental illness that makes you delusional, your delusions don't dictate my reality, nor do they dictate the reality for anybody else. And that's why, and the reality is that when you put a man in a woman's sport, it puts the women at risk. I mean, listen, so, you see, we've both been at Reawake. I don't know if you've seen me, but I'm 6'4". I'm like Sasquatch, right? I'm a big dude. And, I mean, if I put a dress on and go play, a women's sport, I'm going to hurt someone. I'm going to be stronger. I'm going to be bigger, even as an old dude, right? So, that's a big deal. And it's an interesting thing. Now, I'm too far out from being young to be able to answer this question. So I want to ask you this sincerely. As a young person, you've kind of been through, and you've been around, and you've seen what they put these kids through. How do you reconcile? How do you convince these kids? How is it that so many of them believe, and we've gotten to a point where so many of them believe that, listen, I want to pretend I'm this, I want to pretend I'm that, and so you've got to accept it. How have we gotten to that? What have they done that's really kind of damaged and brainwashed the kids in that way?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, this is one of my favorite topics. I always
I could
remind
tell.
people about how, the reason why we're here is obviously because we've rejected God. We've rejected a standard of morality in our society. I said this at the school board recently, like, we are not a Hindu nation. We're not a Muslim nation. This is a nation founded upon biblical principles. John Adams said, our Constitution was created for a moral and religious people. It's wholly inadequate for the government of any other. And so this is a nation founded upon biblical principles. And anyone who does not like that, any politician who doesn't like that, specifically the Democratic Party, the reason why they're so up in arms about our Constitution and our founding documents and these principled ideas that our founding fathers recognized would make our nation thrive and flourish. The reason why they're up in arms about it is because, like John Adams said, it was not created for immoral people. And you look at every single thing that the Democratic Party stands on today: climate change, abortion, homelessness, drug addiction, open borders, child mutilation. I mean, the list is endless. Every single thing they stand on, every single thing they advocate for is pure immorality. It is degeneracy, it's immorality. But you talk about young people specifically. I always tell people, they asked me, Hannah, how can we get more young people out to your events? How can we get my kids out to your events? And I say, the first thing you have to do is you have to come to my events. The parents, it starts in the home, it starts with the parents. And so if young people do not see that their parents care about the truth, care about showing up to these events, then they will never show up to these events and show up and care about the future generations. And so parents, it is their job to educate your children on the history of this country. I think parents have given up, they've abdicated their role as the parent and given it up to the government to educate their children. That is not the government's job, and parents have forgotten that. I mean, the reason why the quote unquote educational system was put in place in the first place was to educate children, to teach them how to read the Bible. Like, that was the initiative of, like, community-based schools, was simply just for people to understand and be able to be literate in the scripture and in the Bible. And so just to see how far we've come, and people say, how in the world did we get here? And I go back to, the 1960s when we removed prayer from schools. We didn't just remove prayer from schools. That's not when it went downhill. It went downhill when parents removed prayer, removed biblical principles from the home and abdicated that role and gave it up to the government. That is when things start to go downhill. And so once parents start to recognize that their role is to be the parent. You are the parent of your children. I mean, I hear so often people show up to my events and I say, where's your teenager at? I mean, they're like 15, 16 years old. They're like, oh, they didn't want to come to the event. You're the parent. You tell your kid to come to the event today. I mean, I remember being 10, 11, 12, 13 years old. If my dad said, you're coming to this event, there are no ifs, ands, and buts. I'm going to the event. This is my father. I respect him, and he's my authority in my life. And I think parents have really just completely abdicated that role, and that is the reason why we're seeing the issues we're seeing. I mean, so often parents wonder why their kids go off to college and completely lose their moral compass, and it's because they did not know the why behind what they believe in. If your kids do not know the why behind the abortion is murder, concept, or I'm a conservative, they don't know why they believe in those things, and they're going to be extremely shakeable and movable when they go off to college and again lose their moral compass. So that's kind of where I stand on that issue, is that if we cannot get young people involved until the parents, the grandparents, and those above them are willing to show up to these events and get involved and care about
Well,
the
I
truth.
mean, I would agree with you. If the parents don't set an example, the kids don't see the example. And
Yeah.
one of the things that you've got to do is you've got to provide those kids with certain things and certain structure and certain this and certain that. And I mean, you can't, I've got two boys. My kids are much closer to your age than mine, obviously, but there's expectations. There's things that we do, and they've got to be prepared to stand on their own 2 feet. And that's a tough thing. It's a tough thing because you want to be your kid's friend. You want to love your kid and just baby your kid. But you also have to be strong, and you have to sometimes say, this is the way it is. It's not anger. It's not negativity. It's just, if I don't teach you these skills as a young guy, kid, you're not going to have them as an adult. So, it is necessary. And you're right. Breaking down the family is certainly, I think foundationally breaking down even when the family, whether it's broken, strong, however it is, I think that the loss of focus on the children You make a baby, you're a parent. For the rest of your life, you are a parent. You can try and shirk that responsibility all you want, but you're a parent. And you have a duty to that kid till the day that kid dies or you die, to take care of them and to teach them and to be there for them. And I agree with you. I think that is the foundational issue that we face. Now, you said you were homeschooled. Have you always been homeschooled, or did you go to school? Do you go to school? How does that work?
Yeah, so I went to kindergarten. I went to public school when I was in kindergarten here in Tennessee, and two of my teachers were a part of the LGBTQ rainbow cult, and
Really?
they proudly shared that with us as 5-year-olds. And that wasn't the only thing. Whenever Barack
I'm doing
Obama was
some math.
running
I'm
for
doing
his
some
second
math.
term.
That's
Go
that's
ahead.
that's not that many years ago. So that's like, like 15 years ago, right? So that's like 2010.
Yeah, 12
Okay,
years
so
ago.
like 20,
Yeah.
2013. So they were pushing that openly back then.
Absolutely. In Tennessee. And not just that. There was a specific scenario that I remember. I mean, I was 5, so I vaguely remember, but I remember it. And the fact that they had these iPads, they were passing around these iPads, and they said, if you could vote for someone in this election, it was Barack Obama and his opponent, who would you choose? And they said, if you could choose, we would want you guys to choose Barack Obama. And it was very explicit when they said that. We would want you to choose Barack Obama. That would be the best option. I'm like, well, that doesn't sound like you're, encouraging me to think for myself. And I remember that pretty to a T, and how it was just kind of like shoved down your throat, this idea of this is what you're going to think, this is how you're going to say things. And I was always, they had these colors, so it was like green, yellow, and red, and I was always put on red. I was always that student put on red because I asked questions, why should we choose to vote for Barack Obama? Why are you playing these very inappropriate videos that they were like music videos that were pretty trashy? I'm like, why would you play that? I remember one day, my dad was a pastor at the time, and I brought in church invitations, and they told me, they scolded me. They said, you are not allowed to pass out church invitations. That is an infringement upon the other student's religious right. They sent me to the principal's office simply because I was inviting my fellow classmates to my church. Yes. And after that, my dad said, that's it, you're going to be homeschooled. So that was kind of like the beginning to the end of my public school involvement. But yeah, no, I would encourage anyone that's watching this right now. I mean, if this is not an ad for homeschooling, I am not sure what is. Public schools, there's no hope. There's no saving the educational system. Even if it is returned back to the states, I cannot encourage people enough to homeschool your children. You send your kids off to school for 7 hours a day. They're locked in. They come home. They do more homework. My dad always told me, he said, everybody's homeschooled. Some do it smarter. Some do it the more efficient way, and some do it the longer way. So everybody comes home. They do school at home, but some do it for only a couple hours, and others do it for 7 hours at school, and they come home and do a couple more hours at home. But I encourage everyone to homeschool their kids. I mean, I raced motocross competitively. I was a national champion in 2020 and 2021. During COVID, I lived at a training facility. I would not have been able to do that if I weren't homeschooled. Now, wrote a book and have a podcast. I travel and speak. None of this would be possible if I weren't homeschooled. I mean, I'm graduating next month with my bachelor's degree, and I don't encourage people to go off to college unless you need to. But because I was able to do this, I'm graduating with my bachelor's. All of this would not have been possible if I weren't homeschooled. So I encourage everyone, homeschool your children. It's the best option, the best thing you could possibly do for them. Stop sending them to this lion's den, these state-sponsored indoctrination camps that have one goal in mind: to indoctrinate your children. And you know this better than anyone, but it's insane that we're even fighting these issues. And yeah, 10 years or 12 years ago, that was happening in Tennessee schools. So,
well, let me ask you, because the reality is that there's a lot of people that can't homeschool their kids, right? They just can't. Maybe they themselves don't have the knowledge to do it. Maybe they're not capable of it. Maybe they can't afford it because both mom and dad have to work. The economy sucks. There's a lot of reasons that people can't. And so I agree with you that there are great benefits for certain people if they can do that. But let me ask you this, because the reality is we're not going to move into that situation. And I always want to fight the reality, right? So, the reality is you can put on a dress, but you're still a boy, right? The reality is that I may not love the fact that the public schools are what they are. In fact, I despise it. My kids don't go to public school. They actually go to They both are boys. They both go to all boys school where they teach Christian values and do all sorts of good things. But for the people who can't afford the private school, can't afford or can't do for whatever reason the homeschool, and that's a lot of them. I think we got to talk about this, and this is a really important issue to me, right? So what do we do to reach what's happening? Because again, even if you weren't in public school, you certainly are much more connected to kids who are in public school now than I am. So I'm asking you as kind of a representative of that group and someone who works with that. If I know you're active, so you're talking to these kids all the time. What's happening there? I mean, so they're pushing like they were with you, but that's ramped up since then. How do we help these kids who, they don't get to make the decision themselves anyways, right? So, and a lot of kids, I can speak for a lot of people who grew up in tough situations, very tough situations. And, if you're in that, maybe mom and dad suck and your only outlet is is your public school. There's a lot of kids who are raised in, areas where their only option is public school. And I'm not defending it at all, because I still disagree with what's happening there, but it's critical. How do we reach those? Because we can't leave these people behind. We got to pray for them. We still got to love them. We want to reach them. We want to help them, right? And so how do you think, as a young person working with other young people, to activate and to educate, which I think is very profound, by the way. I love what you do. I love that you're doing all this. How do we reach these kids? How do we get them? How do we counter what's happening in the public schools where we can't, yes, the best way is mom and dad, but that doesn't always work. So how do we, the good guys that are fighting, how do we do that?
Yeah, so I know I'm going to ruffle a few feathers by saying this. I do believe, I kind of disavow the idea that you can't homeschool. I mean, I know plenty of families that make less than $60K on one income, have 6+ boys, and they homeschool their family. Now they've had to sacrifice a lot of things. They don't do very many sports. They do like local level, free activities that they want to get involved in, but they have had to sacrifice things to protect and shield their children from the explicit material and the harmful content, and really just the oversaturation of what's happening in public schools today. So I do believe that every single person in the United States of America has the opportunity. And people say, I'm not knowledgeable enough. I mean, my parents, whenever they started homeschooling me, my parents had no idea. My parents both came from backgrounds where they went to public school. That was kind of like the odd thing to be homeschooled. It was weird. It wasn't cool to be homeschooled, in their generation, obviously. And so they weren't really sure what to do. But when they saw what was happening in public schools when I went to kindergarten, they realized that they were going to make sacrifices to homeschool me and to educate me the proper way on our history.
If their parents didn't have that background, how did they deal with that? How did they manage to get you, how did they teach you high school math if maybe they didn't remember their algebra 2? How did they do that?
Yeah, well, I think that's where, trial and error, first off. And
it worked, obviously.
Just when it comes
you're
down to,
and you're very well spoken.
Yeah, well, when it comes down to, I think the biggest thing is teach your kids how to read. Like that should be the first initial step, is once they reach that stage where they can read and they're like in that development stage, 5, 6, 7 years old, teach them how to read. Because once you can teach them how to read, then they can read any book about the subjects that you don't know. Maybe you're a little bit iffy on, you just don't understand it, but they know how to read now. You can buy them the book, they read the book, and now they know about the subject. That is one of the best things you could possibly do for your kids. Teach them how to read at an early age, then give them the books that maybe you just don't know much about. They read them, they learn about it, and they just grow in knowledge. I mean, I remember when I started learning to read when I was probably 6 years old, and my dad got me a huge book. It was a Little House on the Prairie book. It was like all the series was like this thick, 3-4 inches thick. And I read the whole thing. And then he'd give me more books like Rich Dad, Poor Dad, things like that. And most of the stuff that I know today didn't come from my homeschool curriculum. It came from other books that my parents gave me. But not just that, involving your kids in adult conversations. That's one of the pluses to homeschooling your kids, is they can learn about their real world a lot faster than they ever could in public or private school, just by engaging in adult conversations with the parents, or sitting Yeah, sitting at the adults table. But as it pertains to reaching young people, I mean, I got involved with Turning Point. I think Turning Point USA is doing a phenomenal job. If you're a young person watching this right now, I say stand up. If you go to public school, I mean, use that opportunity if you do go to public school to start a Turning Point chapter, to start a Young Women for America chapter, a conservative group at your school. Talk about these issues. Don't be afraid to talk about them. Don't be afraid of being called, certain names like a bigot, homophobic. Anytime someone calls me homophobic, I just say they must be truth phobic,
Yeah.
because that's what they are. They're just truth phobic. They don't want to acknowledge the science. They're science
There's
and
no
truth phobic.
phobia.
But anyway,
It's just I
yeah,
have no
truth
phobia
phobia.
of well, yeah, they are truth phobic. There's no phobia. The homophobic. I have no fear of someone being gay or trans or anything else. In fact, I think that that's probably their right. It just doesn't mean that I have to accept it in my world. I don't. I don't. Right? Like, you can do what you want to do. I get it. We're a free country, but it doesn't mean it's okay. And I'm certainly not okay with you interfering with other people's rights because of the choices you're making. So, if you want to be trans, that's fine, but you don't get to play in the girl sport. You don't get to do that, because your delusions don't dictate our reality. So I'm a fan of that concept. I think that's interesting.
I want to touch on this real quick because I know some people will say this, and I have been interviewed by the BBC and some other German TV stations aside from the UK, and they'll always ask me this. I thought you were for freedom. I thought you were for liberty and freedom, but you want to take away people's right to mutilate themselves or to mutilate children. But here's the thing, is that in no healthy society, number one, in no healthy and no sane society are its people, are its citizens chopping off healthy body parts. Okay. You mentioned earlier about the tail in the scales. Imagine if I went to my doctor and I said, doctor, you've been seeing me for a long time. I've been struggling with depression. I found the cure to my depression. If you just chop off my arm at my elbow, I'll be happy. Any doctor, any sane doctor would tell you, no, Hannah, I can't chop off your arm because I took an oath to do no harm. I took an oath to do what's best for my patients and for the future of their lives. And I can't do that. In no right mind could I do that. It would be breaking the oath that I gave, the oath that I made to protect and do no harm to you and my patients. But of course, it's totally fine to chop off healthy breasts and genitals and irreversible surgeries that you can never get back. But not just that. Number two, with much freedom in societies comes 100%. Great responsibility. So yeah, we do live in a free society. We do live in a society where a constitutional public representing the people. But with great freedom comes great responsibility. And it goes back to that point where I said, in no sane society are these things happening. And then people will say, well, are you okay with adults being able to do it? So if it's scientifically impossible, if it denies science, nature, and reality for a child to chop off their healthy breasts and genitals, then it also applies to adults. So I'm actually against human mutilation altogether. A lot of people think that's a little bit extreme, but it's common sense. If it's scientifically impossible, if it denies reality as a child, then it also applies to as an adult. And then people, of course, will get into the whole freedom argument. And I also want to mention the transgender. People say, well, we should let people be transgender. And I've had debates on my show with like the Harry Sissons and the Adam Mockler, the paid DNC shills. They'll come on my show and they say the same thing. Do you think we should make that illegal?
I'm sorry. He's like one of my least favorite human beings on the planet. He just makes me nauseated every time I see or hear from him.
Yeah, it's disgusting things they tweet and post on Twitter. But one of them came on my show, Adam Mockler, who gets on CNN quite often. But anyways, he came on my show and he said, why does it bother you so much? What do you have so much against it? And I said, here's the thing, is that the problem with someone identifying as transgender, which by the way, there's no such thing as transgender because you can't trans your gender, you can't trans your sex. That's been a psychobabble made up term that they've used. Same thing with cisgender. I'm just normal. The opposite of what they use for cisgender. They're just, what they're referring to is we're normal, and that's abnormal to change to attempt to change your sex. But going back to, I shouldn't have to be confused on whether someone is male or female. So while I'm against men and women's sports, we should not be allowing people to even put on woman face or man like that. Again, in no sane and no healthy society are these things happening. So obviously people say we should be careful, and you're a lawyer, we shouldn't make, being transgender illegal. But again, if we're creating a culture that is confused, we should not be walking around thinking, okay, is that a man or a woman? that's when you know that your society has rejected common sense in a level of a moral standard for that society. And it's wild to me, Mr. Tom, that we're having these discussions, but we have to stand firm on these issues. We can't beat around the bush, and we can't have double standards like the one where people say we
Well,
need
we
to
can't.
ban child mutilation, but not
We
adult
can't.
mutilation. Those are clear. That's a
We
clear
can't.
double
Now, I'm
standard.
going to challenge
Go ahead.
you. And I'm going to do this with love and respect because I appreciate and I agree with you on everything you're saying. I actually do, but I am a lawyer, so I'm a pain in the rear. And you know, there's some question whether I have a soul because I'm a lawyer, and that tends to go away with. No, I'm joking. So, with regards to the freedom argument, here's where I would distinguish one thing that you said. You're dead right that when it comes to a genital mutilation of any type, adult or child, we have to look at that one way, and it's distinct, right? And there's a couple distinctions to make. So first of all, as a child, you're going to do that to a kid who is not legally competent to make a decision to buy a beer, to vote, or to join the military, and who may not even be legally able to drive. And you're going to tell me that somehow that child is capable of making that decision. Legally, that makes no sense. We protect our children from child abuse. We protect our children from all these things. And it's kind of like these, drag queen story hour things, right? I mean, we protect kids from sexual exploitation. And what else is that? It's literally called drag queen story hour. If it was just story hour, fine. It's not story hour. It's sexually exploiting a child. So 100%. When we move to adults, as a lawyer, listen, you want to cut your junk off? The problem is that indicates a mental illness. And we don't let doctors do things that are to the detriment of their patients, right? So I'm there with you, right? And we can distinguish that. Here's where I will create a distinction, though. If you are a 40-year-old dude and you want to dress like a girl, in no way under the law can I prevent you from doing that. But in no way under the law can you require that I recognize it. And the reason I think that's important is because with the law, you have to understand it cuts two ways every time. So if I can make a law that bans you from wearing that dress, I could make a law that requires you to wear it. And our Constitution was created in a way, and like I said, I'm challenging you, to protect our freedom above all. So we have kind of these things like, it's better for 1,000 guilty men to go free than one innocent man to go to jail, right? And I believe those sorts of things. At the end of the day, we live in a fallen world. The Bible tells us that. It's very clear. And because we live in a fallen world, man's law can never be perfect, only God's law. Because man's law is imperfect, the best we can do is preserve freedom and then use God's law to try and educate and motivate people. So I don't think that we can ban a dude from wearing a dress. I do think that the other stuff, we can create a good faith argument under the law. But I think what we have to do is exactly what you said. So I agree with you 100%. We have to start strengthening families.
Yeah.
We've got to bring God back in.
Right.
We've got to start teaching people. And we got to make it so people don't want to wear a dress. Why the hell would you want to do that as a dude?
Yeah, and I think this even goes beyond like a legal side, like a legal standpoint 100%. On this. This has got to be a cultural, because again, we can change all these laws, but if the culture does not have a change, a cultural shift, like none of this matters. And so men will stop putting on dresses. Men 100%. Will stop posing as women. If they didn't used
to do it when I was a kid, if you would have came into school wearing a dress as a dude, trust me, you wouldn't have been there long. I mean, when I was a kid, that would never have been tolerated, that cultural thing. But that's why you're so important. That's why it's so critical that people like you can do this. We got to have young people willing to fight this and to say, listen, this is absurd. Look at yourself. You look like Harry Sisson. It's an embarrassment. No, I'm sorry. Like I said, he bothers me a lot. But we've got to have young people who do that. So you are dead right. And I love the way you're saying it. I love your passion. And I mean, I definitely want to support that. And I know you've got to go in a few more minutes. How do you do this? So you're fighting every day. You're going to school board meetings, you're active, you're doing all these things. And I'm very inspired. Like, you got an old jaded guy who's super inspired by your work, right? And I hope you understand that I really am. I got a lot of respect because I think it's incredible that you're doing so much. How how? What are you doing? So on a day-to-day basis, you've made this your mission, your cause, to try and bring the culture back around, to try and shift these things. Strategically, you've got the show, you're speaking. Where are you going with this? Are you getting into? Are you going to be President Hannah at some point? I mean, are you looking? Are you just trying? Are you just doing where God takes you? What's your strategy here? What are you trying to do?
Yeah, absolutely. Just really just taking, doing whatever the Lord has for me. I mean, even in just the beginning stages of having the rally, so a week before I had the rally, well, about a month before the rally, actually, I got a call from Clay Clark, and someone had referred me to Clay Clark because they couldn't speak at this event. And I had never spoken out publicly. And I want to share this real quick. I know I got to go soon, but I want to share this because I think it's kind of
You
to
can have as
summarize
much time
everything.
as you want, Hannah. I mean, you're welcome to stay if you gotta.
Well, I got the call from Clay Clark, and I had never spoken publicly other than a 1 minute prayer at a little dinner, a little dinner with Marsha Blackburn. That was
Oh
it.
my goodness.
Did a little 1 minute prayer. That was it. Got a call from Clay Clark, and he said, "Hey, a pastor friend has referred you to pick up his slot and to speak as a Gen Zer. I was 15 at the time. Would you be willing to speak?" I was like, absolutely. Had no idea what I was getting into. I didn't know how many people were going to be there, what this event was, never heard of it. Well, it happened to be that this Reawaken America tour here in Mount Juliet, Tennessee was a week before the Teens Against Gender Mutilation rally. So I was able to come out to the Reawaken tour, give a 10, 15-minute speech about all of these issues that were happening in our country. And I got to meet General Flynn. And well, General Flynn liked what I said, and ended up giving another call to the rally. So I think a lot of people ended up coming out to the rally the next week from Mount Juliet. And then General Flynn ended up inviting me to some other Reawaken America tours. I think I finished out the last 5 Reawaken America tours were the ones that I spoke at. And then after I was getting more involved and getting on podcasts, my dad said, "Hannah, you should start a podcast and write a book." And I told my dad, I said, "I'm not going any further than this. I'll continue with the Turning Point chapter and hosting events, because I love hosting events and rallies. I think they really kind of create those kinds of things do create cultural shifts because it excites people. It gets this momentum going, and people just get really excited, and they start showing up to meetings and school board meetings and really want to get involved and get activated. But anyway, so I kept telling my dad, no, like, I'm not doing this. Well, September of 2023, I decided to sit down and I would start writing the 5th chapter, which I titled The Poison of Gender Ideology. And I started researching, about Chloe Cole, who I had speak at the rally. She's 20 years old. She's a detransitioner, had her healthy breasts removed at 15, was castrated at 13 with specifically the chemical Lupron, which they used to put male sex offenders on. In many states, they don't anymore because it's too potent. But of course, it's just perfect for people my age and young people who are confused on their identity. So, had Chloe Cole, started talking about Chloe Cole in the book and researching. And then I started getting into John Money. And then I started getting into Alfred Kinsey and started realizing that the first genital mutilation surgery in the United States of America didn't happen in 2015. It wasn't in 2000. It wasn't even in 1990. It was in the 1960s that the first genital mutilation happened at the Johns Hopkins Hospital on a man named Avon Wilson. No legacy media outlet is talking about this. Of course, independent journalists like yourself are talking about this, but all of these things, Alfred Kinsey, some of the most egregious stuff that he labeled in his books, I put it in my book, and I tell people, I wrote this when I was 16, but I would say that anyone under the age of 13 probably should not read the book.
Promote it. Tell us where to get it. Tell us how to get it.
Yeah, they can get the book. I don't know if if you guys can see if it's crooked or not, if it's backwards, but Last Chance to Save Our Republic, they can get it on any online bookstore. Amazon's probably the best place. It's quick and easy, but cultureof1776.com is my website, and they can find the link to the book there. But highly encourage your audience to get the book. A lot of the issues that I talk about, feminism, Margaret Sanger, abortion, the death industry, pornography, the digital age that we're living in. Just the infringement, something as simple as the infringement on our Second Amendment, the similarities between, what's happening in our country with gun control, which I actually call them, I call this an anti-self-defense movement, because they don't just want your guns. They want your knives. They want your pepper spray. They want anything to prevent you from defending your family from a tyrannical government. This is the same trend that we have seen throughout history and tyrannical dictatorships. So the book, Last Chance to Save Our Republic, highly encourage your audience to get it. I'd say probably under 13. I don't recommend, because it does get a little bit deep in the some of the chapters. But this is what they said. This is what the communists said in their own words, and that's why I put it in there, because I think it's important to put what they said so people can understand the full context of what we're dealing with here. So appreciate you, Mr. Tom, and I appreciate you allowing me to come on the show today.
No, I appreciate you, Hannah, and I hope you understand. Yeah, I got to bust. I have to, ask some tough questions here and there, but I really do appreciate what you're doing. I think that it's incredible. I think you're a hero. I think you should keep doing what you're doing, and if I can help you in any way, shape, or form, don't ever hesitate. We're happy to support you however we can. We need more of you. And for those of us old guys that are out there, I want to remind y'all: if we don't support people like Hannah, they can't do what they're doing, right? We can't be, the old guys end up being kind of gatekeepers, and if we're not doing things to lift the young ones up, it becomes real hard to do. So we got to back you. If there's anything that I can do at any point, don't hesitate to reach out to us. Thank you so much. Thank you for coming on. You let me know. We'll come on your show and you can bust my chops on whatever you want. But thank you. So
absolutely. Can't go ahead.
No, we'll have you anytime.
Okay. Thank you guys so much. God bless you guys. And I'm excited to have you on the show also.
Thanks, Hannah. We'll have you back soon. All right. Oops. All right, everybody. That's Hannah Faulkner. I got to tell you guys, it makes my life better knowing that there's some young people out there that are doing what they got to do and fighting what they got to fight. I mean, that's a wonderful, wonderful thing. And what an inspiring young lady. I mean, 17 years old, that girl is well-spoken, very sharp, ornery as hell. Boy, she's got some spine there and some spunk. So I'm that's good. That's what we need from the young generation. We need people who are steadfast and willing to fight. So that's a wonderful thing. Glad to support her, really on a pretty profound level. All right, folks, I want to talk a little bit about something. This is a big deal, and I'm actually pulling out because I've got another paper I've got to reference here. This is a pretty big deal. You've heard me talk a little bit about saRNA, right? Self-amplifying RNA. Well, the Arctis saRNA vaccines are being fast-tracked, and this is really kind of a make or break moment in our country, right? This is a big deal. These are, once they're out, they're going to be everywhere. They're going to be transmissible. They're going to have an impact on you. And the thing that gets me is my kids are, getting to that age. My oldest son's 15. At some point, he's going to be looking for a wife, girlfriend, whatever, I'm sure. And I'm concerned about it, right? Because we already have the mRNA. That's already damaging, these people's ability. I mean, it makes it harder to conceive, harder to have babies, harder to do all sorts of things. And the mRNA is likely transmissible on some levels, depending on what happened. But the saRNA is a whole nother level, right? And so, it's hard. There's a lot of things we could talk about with saRNA. saRNA stands for self-amplifying RNA, and they get this whole nother class of, they're calling them vaccines, but they aren't, to deal with this, right? saRNA, once it's in your system, it's got tools. It comes with a toolkit, right? And what it does is it makes more of itself. This is unbelievably dangerous because we don't know that there's necessarily an off switch on this. They claim that it will be in your system for a period of time and then kind of wane away. But the reality is that they were dead wrong on everything they said on the mRNA. They said that the mRNA was going to go into your system, be there, and then go away. That isn't how it worked out at all. It turns out that we've got people, I think it was McCullough just did a study, found out that they were still finding spike protein. It looked like active mRNAs. I think he said 600 or 700 days after injection. So this means that the off switch that they thought was there doesn't actually work or doesn't exist. One of the two. It doesn't matter how you look at it. That's a phenomenal thing, right? That is a very, very big deal. So with the SA, because it's self-amplifying, because it keeps coming, this is going to be something that is going to keep going on. It's going to keep happening. It's going to keep being a thing, right? That's a big deal to me, right? It's a very big deal because this could, like I said, this could be. So I put together a white paper, and we're going to be putting this out publicly. But basically, doing is we're kind of talking about that, and I'm asking for a halt SANA. We're going to be sending this up the food chain to some people here, but we want to at minimum have some studies. It ought to be just stopped. It really, I mean, in any sane world, this would not even be a question because mRNA is such a disaster. The fact that we're doubling down on it is insane. But this saRNA, to me, once this is out of the bag, it's already out in Europe and Japan, which is disastrous because it will eventually kind of be everywhere, right? So once it's out, it's kind of out, but it's really a bad thing. So we've got to recognize that we're going to put this out here, and even in clinical studies, once it's out, it's out. And the thing that I think is most likely that I can say about this in terms of risk of spreading is as an STD, right? I think that this stuff's going to qualify as an STD, except for it's not a disease. It's well, arguably, I guess it depends on how you look at it. But these things, they go all over the body. First of all, they go throughout the body. They attack the different organs. They go everywhere. I mean, this stuff is a disaster. It never stayed in your shoulder. The mRNA never stayed in your shoulder, like they said. And the saRNA won't either. It'll go all over, and it'll get embedded into tissues all over the body. And then those tissues may end up having the same issues that we have with mRNA, is that they look like they're bad, and so your body attacks them. This could create heart issues, brain issues, all the things we're seeing with mRNA, but it never goes away with saRNA. This stuff's likely to persist far longer. And since nobody's actually studying this properly, it's a disaster. So you've got Arctis, they're doing the 154. They've got a couple different vaccines that we're on. You got Gemcovac that's doing some other things that, kind of similar. But they amplify RNA with the host cells with an alpha virus. So it's Genovac. These are, like I said, exceedingly dangerous. And what's going to happen is because of the persistence, right? Because saRNA is likely to persist for an extended period of time. We know that the mRNA does, and saRNA is likely to be even worse, right? Because they persist, because they are self-amplifying, they're going to continue in there, and they have the opportunity to kind of merge with other things in your body and become contagious, I would argue, right? So this could be from bodily fluids, particularly, again, sex fluids, things like that. That's a real big deal. You could be breast milk. Remember breast milk? We got that as an issue. We've got all the things that happen if you're pregnant, because we know that the mRNA doesn't necessarily, it can cross the placenta barrier. So all the same thing with the SA, but it's even more likely to be contagious, right? If it recombines with wild viruses, it could be even more contagious, right? Because this is something that if it were, and it's not super likely that would happen, but it becomes more likely the longer it persists in your body. And since saRNA might be there forever, that could be a real issue, right? So then you see it, like I said, in the sex organs, this could be a critical thing. Now you look at the money involved in this, it becomes a real issue. Now, when we look at issues related to this, we've got unconsented transmission, right? So you get vaccinated, you could potentially transmit that vaccine to another person who becomes vaccinated because they took it. You don't have to tell them. I mean, listen, people aren't even honest when they disclose about STDs, right? So when we talk about, saRNA, I mean, what they're going to tell you about their vaccine status? You're going to trust that? That could be an issue. You could just have people getting sick with get these chimeric viruses. There's extra issues if you're immunocompromised. The whole thing is an issue. Plus, the erosion of public trust with this, it's only going to damage the faith in our public health institutions further by doing this. I mean, this is a real issue. So anyways, we're calling for a halt on this. And at minimum, we'd like to see some long-term persistent studies to see how long this stuff stays in your body. We'd like to see some shedding studies. Does this shed sexually through other things? And the answer is almost certainly yes, but let's do a study on it, right? Why not? There's no urgency for these things, right? There's no need for them. We don't need any vaccines. There's no emergency health issue that we need them for. So why not study it properly? We need to have sex transmission trials. We need to have recombination trials to see whether or not they can merge with alpha viruses or other such things. We need to see what happens with immunocompromised. We also need some of this to be done by independent third parties, because that's not happening. And that's a really big deal, because, we see all this nonsense occurring, and, we aren't quite to Bobby's gold standards yet. Bobby said that there were gold standards. Well, they will be. I'm sure Bobby will get us there. But as of right now, my buddy Henry Ely showed me yesterday, this is a study that they're doing on this nonsense, on this Arctis 2304, and they're not doing a gold standard. Their placebo is an inactivated flu vaccine. That's not a placebo. A placebo is saline. So that is not a gold standard test. We have got to get these things done, right? We've got to get this done right. And this leads to the issue, one of the big issues that we're having in the MAHA movement. And the reason that we have such a big fight right now, you got TWC, you got Kelly Means, you got all these guys fighting, Casey Means, you got the appointment here, just craziness everywhere, right? And here right on the front page of TWC, they got a response against Kelly Means. They've got this is damaging the MAHA movement on a profound level, right? And whether the means are good, whether they're bad, whatever they are, their approach with TWC was not acceptable. I don't work with TWC. I don't get anything from TWC. I've never really. They've never given me a dime for anything. So I'm not trying to defend them. What I'm saying though is, you don't go threatening people that you're going to go tell the secretary of HHS. You're going to tell people on them. You're going to, come after them politically because you're grumpy with them. That is not an acceptable thing. But we have these explosions occurring all over the place, and they're tearing apart the MAHA movement. They're distracting from the things we need to get done. And the part of the reason that's happening, though, is if you are MAHA, your position on mRNA and saRNA and these other RNA and gene therapy techs is really a litmus test type thing. You can't tell us, after COVID and what we've seen with the mRNA vaccines, you can't tell us, after all we've been through for the last 5 years, that you're MAHA, but you're okay with some of this stuff. You can't, because those things are mutually exclusive, right? Those are mutually exclusive. They don't work. They will never work. It is what it is, right? So these are foundational things that are tearing the movement apart, because for those of us that really kind of laid our lives on the line to fight for the MAHA movement during COVID, to see all the attention that these people are getting because they're politically palatable. And I'm not, again, I'm not taking a position on Kelly and Casey. I don't know where they are. But, at the end of the day, they have not been outspoken about mRNA in any way, shape, or form. And so you look at your Mary Tyler Bowdens, your Sherry Tenpennies, your Henry Elys, all these guys who are warriors. Of course they're mad. Of course they're mad. They're mad because you've got these people who didn't fight the fight that they just fought, didn't face the persecution they just faced. And, they've got a seat at the table, but the other people aren't. So this is a natural thing that's occurring. But, you can call it what you want to call it. You can blame it on whatever you want to blame it on, but it is tearing MAHA apart, and it's going to continue to, and it's only going to get worse. So at the end of the day, that's what's happening. That's where this is going, and it's going to get worse. And unless we start making some changes, unless we start doing some things, that's what's going to happen. MAHA needs to start taking a stand on some things at the top. And the saRNA, in my opinion, is one of the top things that they need to take a stand on, because that's game over once that's out. It's just too contagious, too spread. I don't know what we do on that. So anyways, there's a lot more to be said on this. We're going to get more into this in the next few days, because we can't heal the rift in MAHA if we don't talk about it. So we've got to start acknowledging both sides and recognizing what's going on. And, it's important to get the food additives out. It's important to do some of these other things. And I understand the pragmatic view. We'll get this stuff over time. But, every day that the mRNA is on the market, another kid's dying. Another person's being injured. So you'll have to forgive those of us that are fighting against it if we're a little bit grumpy about the continuation of this. So anyways, we'll have more soon, folks.